We're pleased to bring you the second episode in the History of Smyrna series. Today, we're standing in front of Assembly Hall in the heart of the Depot District. Built between 1910 and 1915, this building has been home to a funeral home, a fire station, and even City Hall before becoming part of Smyrna Parks and Recreation in 2014. The stories that you'll hear today are part of the fabric of our community. They weave together the past with the present. This is our town and our history. We invite you to enjoy the history of Smyrna.
Hi, I'm Coon Victory, and today we have with us 5 guests. I've known Patsy since the early 60s. We were involved with our kids with the ball programs, with our senior citizens, and our bean dinners. And next is Miss Tilly Hager, who grew up in the Rocky Fork area, and then moved to Smyrna and married a local guy, and has been involved with these organizations for a long time. Next is John Moore, John worked with his parents 2 doors down with a local grocery store. And then across from John is Jean Hoover Ross, who also grew up here about 2 blocks up the street. And she walked these streets here in Smyrna before we had the highways and all that. And then next is our youngest member, Mike Mitchell, who's 70. Who grew up on the other side of town where the Stars and Strikes is located today. And so we go to meet here in the Smyrna Assembly Hall, which was the home of our first fire engine, our first city hall. And John, you said you remember something about the first guy who worked here? One of the first guys?
In
the city hall.
Mr. Posey Gwynn had a desk right up in the corner there by the door. Yeah. I guess that was it. But they used to vote here. This was a voting precinct for Smyrna.
And then Gene, you could, with you living right up the street, you can probably remember some things that went on here at the Assembly Hall.
Yeah, Tilly and I and a bunch of other people in Smyrna started a rescue squad. The men did. It was a CB rescue squad, and we all had CB radios, and our boats and our trucks and gravel hooks, so we fished people out of the lake and stuff was all inside here. And upstairs we had a clothes closet that we could give food to them. But even before that, the fire engines used to sit in here. It was the only fire hall we had, and we didn't mention this earlier, but if a train came and the train was sitting on the track and your house was on fire on that side, there was no way to get the fire engine to you.
You had to wait.
But you had to wait till the train got off of the track, and especially if it was long enough to close both tracks. And so those are my memories of what was here. I do know Sam Ridley, when he was mayor, same thing as John said. He had a little desk in there, and that's where they did all the business.
Mike, you recall any?
Yeah, I got a good memory of the place. A lot of the parents got together and we turned this thing into a youth recreational area. It's called CYRO, Smyrna Youth Recreation Organization, and it's supposed to tie into the fire hall name, CYRO. And there was a stage right back here behind where Coon and Patchy are sitting. And I actually played in a band when I was in high school. And that we played here. And so I've been on a stage right there playing, and they had dances, and it was a big time there for a while. And I think we lost it to the rescue squad, which was probably a good move. But we had a good time here.
But then, Tilly, you recall, was Assembly Hall still here when you came to Smyrna? Do you recall?
Yes.
It was here then?
And I remember Mr. Howard Coleman being he was a city clerk, I think he was a city clerk. You paid your bills here, and he was the only one that was here.
You did. I forgot about that, Taylor.
And then Smyrna started growing, and the fire department moved across tracks where and then it was our first big city hall, and which is the home of our fire department today.
Also, in your daddy's store, if you wanted lunch, you just went back to the counter and told somebody to slice you some bologna and cheese, and they put it on some bread, and you ate it sitting back there.
It was a destination for kids walking home from school. I didn't walk home much because I lived pretty far away. But when I did walk, we'd stop at Moore's Market and get a brownie, maybe some bologna and crackers, and visit with your folks. That was great fun.
Do you recall about what you had to pay for your Coke back then? Probably
no.
a nickel?
Probably.
Probably a
Had to be
nickel.
cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, they went up to 6 cents, and people just fussed about it. I'm not going to pay 6 cents for a Coke.
And you had to bring the bottle back, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, you wanted to,
There's
'cause
return
you
bottles
got
back
some money
then.
for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Mr. Moore back there behind the counter, and he would cut the meat, wrap it in white paper for you. That doesn't happen anymore, unless it's a specialty market, I guess, somewhere.
And they were also real good about always hiring us as teenagers for generations down. Some of the ones that their brothers were the meat cutters, like my husband's brother was a meat cutter, then he worked at the store, and then Danny's Faye worked at the store, and you know, they just went on and on. It was always somebody from the school that did their after school work.
Yeah, we always had a waiting list of people, the kids that wanted to work at the store.
Well, I wasn't on that list. I didn't want a job. I was just having fun. That was the story of my life.
Tilly, you kind of grew up in the Rocky Fork area?
I did. Big
From a
city.
large family?
Big city, large family.
It was probably, and I came up from Old Jefferson, and it was a treat for us to come to Smyrna.
Oh, it was a very good treat for us to come to Smyrna, go to Uncle Doll's store, get our shoes.
Yes. And then if we went to Murfreesboro, we was in Big Cotton.
Oh, I don't think I ever got to Murfreesboro.
Murfreesboro was a big place to go to. But you came from a large family, and then you married a local guy here. And
I
then
did.
I was thinking yesterday about Mr. Hager's shop over about close to where the Bob Spivey's building is today. What did Mr. Hager, did he make furniture, or what did he do?
Yeah, but he refinished,
Refinished furniture.
mostly refinishing furniture.
Okay.
But he did make some.
But your husband, John, did he pick up any of that or not?
Yes, he's made some things.
He did that too. Okay. And then Patsy is from the big city of Crossroad. No, where is it in Lebanon?
Tucker's
Crossroad. Yeah, Tucker's Crossroad.
You know well and good where it is.
And then Patsy came to Smyrna in about 1960 and found her husband, and she's been here ever since. Now, Jean, you grew up 2 blocks up the street. Your mother and
almost from here.
Yes, your mother and dad was in the funeral home business, and so you can relate how Smyrna was back then.
Pretty much. And before we go any further, this building, Tilly and I are the only ones I see in this room, but we were the only ones that the rescue squad started right here in this building. We were both charter members of the Smyrna Rescue Squad, and we had our boats and our trucks and all of our stuff inside this building for years right here.
I can go back before that.
And they wouldn't give us the telephones, so Don Reese, who was the mailman, everybody knows who Don Reese was, he had to get the telephone number in his name at his house, and if you called, you were calling his house instead of here because they wouldn't let us have a business phone. So that was one thing that I remembered a lot. You know, we spent here and we had what? Clothes? Didn't we have clothes upstairs? Didn't we have a clothes closet upstairs? That's what I thought. Here too. A lot of people don't know that.
Do you remember the short time when this was a teenage nightclub?
No.
You don't?
I was probably raising kids by then.
Smyrna Youth Recreation Organization called Cyro. And there was a stage right here, and I played in a band in high school that played
What year
here.
was that?
I don't know.
What year
Had
did
to
you
be in the
graduate?
60s.
I graduated in '68.
Oh, well,
So
see, I
it'd
told
been
you I was raising
middle
kids.
60s.
Raising 3 by that time.
Middle 60s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We didn't,
middle to late.
we
Yeah.
didn't go anywhere. But anyway, it is some really things Tilly might remember in 1950, I think it was, 50, 51, when the trains wrecked right downtown here. 2 trains ran together and they tore up the whole half of the the reason the train station is no bigger than it is now. But it used to be a whole lot bigger than that. But this picture, oh, my father wrote this book, in case you're interested about that. Smyrna, the Church, the Town. Walter Hoover was his name. You can get them at the library if you'd like one, or Gill's Hardware. But anyway, we would go downtown, my brother and a couple other guys, Boy Junior Coleman, most of them, y'all. The train track had cars that sat on the track beside the station where the men that were working on the tracks lived in during the week, but they went home on the weekends. So our big deal was to, we'd get on the front part of it and we'd run across the top and jump to the next train and to the next car and to the next car till we got to the last car, and you could slide down the cold car and come out the bottom and go back to the back and come again. That was our weekend fun.
That's a big time.
Needless to say, I grew up with 7 boys and me.
Yeah.
I was the only girl on the whole block. So
You were probably the youngest.
I was the youngest
Yeah.
and the only girl, and so whatever they did, I did right with them. But my dad did own the funeral home in Smyrna, and my husband and I both, one husband then, but we were both 15 with no driver's license, and we were driving those ambulances, picking people up before they even had, but everybody in Smyrna knew we didn't have any license, but it was no big deal like it is now. It just was it was a hearse when it had a body in it, and it was a ambulance with a cot when it didn't have a body in it. So.
But Gene, back then you mentioned that you and Jim would go around. The ambulance was like the ambulance service is today.
Yes, that was the ambulance service.
Right.
So, another thing people don't remember, and you won't maybe, but the road downtown, which is Lowry Street, you could not go to Murfreesboro or Nashville on it till 1960. That was the first time it was a full street. And Tilly might remember this, because she went to the Methodist church, right? And you remember at Christmas, Miss Vera Cole and them always had those chimes that played Christmas music on top of the church. Every year at Christmas time, she played for 2 weeks, a week before and a week after Christmas, we had Christmas chime. And the Presbyterian church, it had a bell tower. And in the bell tower, every Sunday morning, about 15 minutes before church time, Brother Smith went over and rang those bells. And because there was no highway, you could hear them all over town. So it was a thing.
You talking about those bells, I can recall at Lane's Cedar Mill, they'd have a whistle, I believe, at 12 o'clock, wasn't it?
11:30 and 12 o'clock.
11:30,
and then was the lunchtime to get
That
off.
was the start of lunch, and the other one was the
12
end of
o'clock we get off,
lunch.
and at 3:30 in the afternoon, when 30 minutes before time to get off.
Okay, Mike, you grew up on the other end of town, which you mentioned a while ago was a long way off, which is where the Kmart was located, and now Stars and Stripes in that area there. And it wasn't any buildings there that I can recall.
There weren't any.
Just your home place and your grandmother's place there. Was that the first strip mall that we had in Smyrna, right there, or do you recall?
As far as I know, you know.
The other one, I believe.
Go ahead, John, because my memories are not all the way.
I think the
100%
one
there.
down the other end of town was the first one.
It was.
Yeah.
And then I know Kmart just got in negotiations with my parents later on, or Wiggins and Associates is who it was, to buy that property. But when I grew up, we were the last house in Smyrna going out toward Laverne. We were the last house in town, or what I call still being part of town. And then right out past our house was the entrance to the front gate of the base. And so we were out there on the edge on some of my grandmother's farm property.
Did you slip onto the base sometimes?
Quite often.
Oh, quite often.
Yeah, I remember they used to drop these drone parachutes to see which way the wind was blowing before they dropped the actual real paratroopers. And so one time I was out there and I watched all that all the time, and one of those little parachutes got pretty close to the fence. Well, I climbed over that fence and crawled on my belly like I was in combat. Went over there and got that parachute, brought it back, thought I was really doing something. Scared to death that I did it, but I got me a parachute from the Seward Air Force Base.
They didn't come pick it up?
No, it was a little bitty drone chute with a little beaded bag on the end of it just to tell which way the wind was blowing. They probably would have picked it up. They'd have known about
Well, she was talking about the planes flying low and stuff. And I, you know, y'all know where I live, just right up the street here. Back in the 40s and 50s, when they were there a lot, I mean, when they were still flying, they flew right over the top of our house. And those C-130s would fly low enough that you could wave at the pilot sitting in the thing, and he'd wave back at you. And because you stand out in the front yard, and a lot of times they'd have those planes with no engines on, gliders. And they'd cut the rope right in front of our house, and then the gliders would go on in and land out at Seward, and the C-130 would come back around. And
Yeah, our house was right off the end of a
right
main
end
runway,
And-
and boy, you talk about flying low with the landing lights and stuff on. I got to where I didn't even hear it.
Yeah, you know,
They came
and
over all
I
the
bet
time.
you're like me, and Coon maybe, but not more than us. If a C-130 flies over, you don't have to look up. You know
Yeah,
what
yeah.
the sound of that C-130 is.
You're right.
So, and down at his grandmother's, I don't know if he remembers, well, he would remember because he wasn't born. But anyway, in the 40s and 50s, where the Kmart is, water would stand, and that was where we go ice
Now,
skating.
Gene, I was born in 1950, and I've had a boat out on that water.
I know, well, we used to go down there, and ice skate, because it was the only place around
Yeah,
where you had
freeze.
frozen enough ice to skate on.
That was the strangest deal. That water, I've seen that water bubble up out of the ground when there wasn't a cloud in the sky.
Because it rises with Cumberland River.
Spring connected to the Cumberland River. And I had a flat rock down in the lower yard that I played on when I was a kid, played my trucks and toys out there on it. And there was a hole in it. And some days water would bubble up out of that. And like I said, it would be just, you know, day like today, nice and sunny. And I'd play out there and run my truck through that water bubbling up out of the ground, you know. And some of that water that got up down there was fed from underneath.
Also, I remember down in that area, we had a go-kart track down there at one time. Do you recall the go-kart track?
Very well.
I remember that.
Yeah, Pusher Howell.
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Howell had that.
Yeah, I drove on it.
Yeah,
Well, across the street, before that, we had those trampolines that were in the
Trampoline,
ground.
yeah.
When you got on them, you got down in them, and they bounced off of the ground. That was some of the first stuff that was down there.
that go-kart track was a cool thing. They leased that property from my grandmother. It was right up there at highway frontage, right up there, perfect location. And Chief Bill Culberson's uncle, Mike Culberson, ran that thing. And he had a black man that worked there with him that couldn't speak or hear, I don't think. But he could work on those go-karts, and he could adjust the engines and keep them running for everybody so they could rent them at night. Well, I'd walk up there almost every day, and I was the test driver. They'd let me test it after they adjusted it, and I had more free laps on that go-kart track than anybody in Smyrna.
You didn't crash any time.
No, but they'd have to wave me in, though. They'd finally go, okay, 5 laps is enough. You know? I remember it real well. Those are good folks. I really like Mike Culberson.
I went to high school here. I went to elementary school at Old Jefferson, which is grades 1 through 8. It was a four-room school, 2 grades per room, and same teacher for each room. And then came to Smyrna High School, which was the old rock school then, which is where the Smyrna Library is located today, and went there for 2 years. And then my junior year, we walked over to where the Smyrna Middle School is today on Hazelwood Drive. I was part of that. Gene was part of
The
that.
first one to graduate.
Were you part of that, Mike?
I went the second year it opened when I got to go.
Okay,
there, I
so you
believe.
was still in elementary
I
school there
was.
then.
It
And
might have been the second year.
yeah, and then was fortunate enough to go to MTSU to college. And if it hadn't been in Rutherford County, I wouldn't have been able to go. But I was fortunate enough to work across the street at Cross and Supply Company and make enough money during the summer to pay for my tuition to go to MTSU. So then came back and was working and got involved with politics a little bit. The mayor came down and wanted to know if I wanted to run for county, was called county court then. I said, I don't know nothing about county court. He said, you'll be all right. So I went up there, and Mr. W.E. Carter, I rode with him, and Knox Ridley, we represented Smyrna. And so then also a little during that time, I got involved with the city council. And then my responsibilities as city council, we had certain areas of the city that we were responsible for back then. And that was back in the late 70s, early 80s. And my position was the Commissioner of Parks and Recreation, and I really enjoyed that. And so that kind of sums up my tale of how I was involved with Smyrna. But Patsy, she don't like to toot her horn, but Patsy has been involved with almost every phase of anything here in Smyrna. Gene mentioned start of the rescue squad. Patsy was one of the founding members of the Smyrna Senior Citizens. And she got the people involved. Now she can tell you about how she got the senior citizens started. She was also heavily involved with our Sam Davis home, which is a historic part of here in town. She was a member of our school board for representing the north end of Rutherford County. And we still have our bean dinner every year here in Smyrna. And Patsy is one of the starters of the bean dinner. She's very involved with the church, and we were neighbors for a few years, and excellent neighbors. And so I can't say enough about Patsy, but so Patsy don't like to talk about that. But tell us how you got the bean dinner started, Patsy.
Well, the bean dinner was the social event of the year almost for a while. We started as a fundraiser for senior citizens. And lo and behold, if y'all can remember this, of course, we started Senior Citizens as a result of Reverend Luke Dunn's sermon one Sunday, where he said it was too bad that there was nowhere in Smyrna for older people to go other than their own church fellowships, you know. And at the time, I was expecting our third child, and it was a pretty warm Sunday morning in April. I had on a choir robe sitting over there in the Methodist church on the side, and it was hot, and the air conditioner was just pumping like crazy. And I thought, be glad when this sermon's over. But he did say something that kind of struck a note with me about the seniors not having anywhere to go. So I took it back to the United Methodist women that I was president of at the time, and they nodded their heads in agreement. Yes, we could do that. We could do that. So that's how it started. We have started with 10 members, and John has a picture somewhere with some of them. And I looked at that and I told Tilly, the sad part of it is they're all gone. They're all gone. And we started with 10 members, and now we have 500 and over. But the bean dinners started as a fundraiser, and we carried it on for about 27, 28 years, and the Lions Club took it over. We met in the Methodist Church for a couple of years, and they would not play bingo. They would not. I had to have Bible games and things like that. They wouldn't play bingo, wouldn't play cards. I mean, we were under a church roof, and back in that time, that was all that mattered. So I thought, we got to get out of here, So the house that actually Chief Arnold lives in right down the street, 100 Hazelwood, became vacant. It was the Nance home. Miss Nance, Stella Nance Huey, and her mother lived there. And Ms. Nance passed away, and her daughter Marie had the rental of that house. So she rented it to us for $65 a month. We moved in there, I can't remember the exact date, we started in 71, so somewhere 73, 74. And if you can believe it, I want to tell Chief, I've got a picture. We had a bean dinner in that little house. Mm-hmm. Did you come? Yes. You probably did. Yes. I don't know how we did it, but it just grew, and cakewalks and all those kinds of things. And this community, the Croslands, everybody, this whole community we have had the support through the years of people who have really supported Smyrna Senior Citizens. And as far as the school board is concerned, I was on that for 6 good years of my life, thanks to Mr. Victory, who said, "Got something I want you to do." And I said, what is that? "Run for the school board." I said, I don't know anything about running for the school board. He said, "Well, just talk to Bill about it." And Bill's usual fashion, "Well, you know, whatever you want to do." So for the next 6 years, I was on the school board, and I still owe Mr. Victory for those years of my life. But I have to say this, it was an experience I wouldn't take anything in the world for, and I thank him for that. I could kill him for it sometimes, but in those years, but I wouldn't take anything for it, because you really get an idea of what teachers and people go through to educate our children. And in this situation that we're in now, I can't imagine how they're going to have open these schools with this pandemic that we're in.
Tilly, you grew up in Rocky Fork and came to, where did you go to elementary school?
Triune.
Triune? And then how long did you go there? How many years did you go there, and then from there where?
We moved to, from there we moved to closest to Smyrna, but I still went to Triune. And then I came here. Well, we went to actually Adams, Tennessee, after I finished the 8th grade at Laverne. And my brother and his wife had a new baby, and anyway, she died at birth. So my mother and I moved in with him till school started again, and then we moved back to Smyrna.
So you graduated from Smyrna High School, yeah. And then I assume you and Johnny got married. Then you started working. I can recall when you worked at the Smyrna Service Center. Now, did you work when it was across the street where the donut shop is today? No. She worked over here. Yeah, but I can recall when the service center was there, and about 1960, it caught on fire. I'm going to say around 60, because I was up at the high school where the old rock school is. We were practicing football. I was a manager, and we could see all this smoke. And I was a manager my first freshman and sophomore year, so it was one of those 2 years, 59 or 60.
No, it had to be a little later than that, because I was already married and lived over on that side of town, and Jim was already on the fire department. So it was mid-60s anyway, in the 60s, but we could see it, and we walked down there to it from that side of town when it was burning. So it was in the early 60s.
I don't remember what year it was, but I rode a bicycle up there from my house to see it.
Yeah.
And the fireman was telling us to stay back.
Yeah,
there was ammunition in there, and it was going off.
It was the early 60s, but it was later than 59, because I was already graduated from high school and married.
Okay, but then I remember you working there, and then what did y'all sell at the Smyrna Service Center?
Hardware, furniture, appliances. I was there 18 years.
18 years, and who did you work with in there?
Lionel Hodge.
Mr. Hodge?
And Mr. Johnson.
And then later on, I can recall you came down about four stores, four buildings, and you was with the Rutherford Courier.
I was there 22 years. So I stayed on Front Street.
But I can recall you and Mason Tucker, who was the editor of the Courier back then, and Miss Tucker, and you were in there. What responsibilities did you have with the Courier? Oh, you bookkeeping. Okay. I can recall some times during the year that you and Miss Tucker would come up and eat with me and Mama and Daddy.
It was one of the best meals I've ever eaten in my life. Your mother was a great cook.
Yeah, she enjoyed cooking. So that's what I can recall about Tilly. And she was also been heavily involved with her community in church activities. And Tilly mentioned the the bean dinners and the senior citizens. She's been heavily involved with that. Then we mentioned John earlier about being 2 doors down with a grocery store. I can recall being able to go in there and purchase your merchandise, and you writing it out on a little tablet.
Well,
You could charge it.
It was a charge book.
Yeah, charge book. Then you want to tell us some things about that at your store, John?
And who didn't pay, John? And who didn't pay?
Oh, they paid. I went to see a few of them. No, I did a lot of things before I got there.
Okay.
I graduated in 1950. You talking about being born in 1950. I graduated from high school in 1950.
That's hard for me to imagine, John.
So if y'all is good at figuring, you know I'm 88. But I started out when I was in school delivering papers, and then I got interested in photography, worked in the studio while I was in high school. Then I went to work for the newspaper as a photographer, and that's when the Korean War broke out, and Johnny Hager and I were in the Air Force together. He had one of those dress-up jobs. He worked in the wing headquarters. He wasn't dressed up. I worked in photography. But they sent us down to Memphis. They were trying to get everybody trained because it looked like a big war was coming on. And they tried to wanted to get everybody in, get them drafted, get them trained. So I went down and joined the Air Force. Well, I joined the National Guard, and I was in the Guard for, I think, 11 days, and then went on active duty. They sent us to Memphis for basic training. Right behind the airport, there was an old Army air base. Well, it's from World War II. And we did our training there, and we didn't have a rifle range. We had to go to the Navy base for the rifle training, and went downtown to the swimming pool. Everybody had learned to swim. Took us up on that tower. Some of them said, "I can't swim." Well, you'll learn on the way down. But we marched, and one time they did a 10-mile hike from the air base, walked down the road to the airways and around, and then got to the Mississippi border. We went on down into Mississippi on a dirt road and turned around and came back. That was a 10-mile hike. So then they sent us to Shawfield, South Carolina, and I went from, well, the photography I was doing in the Air Force was just about like news photography. It's just like I was already trained. I didn't need to know anything about that. Then I got into aerial photography at Shaw and went to Texas and went on maneuvers, came back to Shaw, and then the war kind of eased up, so they started sending us home. So then I worked with a couple of photographers after that, and then the job played out, so I went to work for my dad. Worked there in the store. And I did the buying and the bookkeeping and all that kind of stuff. And when the big store started coming to town, I was working hard and making little, so I figured it's time to go. I went down to co-op and got me a job. Worked down there in the plant. Oh, in the meantime, I'd got married too. And we were, in 1957, we got married and rented a little old house. And so I worked at the co-op, started out, the only job they had was working in the plant, building steel farm gates. And you go picking up steel all day long, it'll put some muscle on you. So I worked there, and then they needed somebody in the office, so they put me over in crops division. I had a desk job then. Didn't like it, but it was, I hate desk work. But anyway, they needed an artist. The advertising department, they couldn't stay caught up, so they needed an artist. So they started put me in the print shop, gave me my own office and dark room and all. This went back when you had to do everything and before you could print it. You know, Mike.
We still do it that way.
Before you print it, you had to draw it or paste it up.
Right.
So I did that.
Then photograph it,
Yeah.
have a negative, and make a plate. And that's the old school way to do it. No computers back then.
Well, see, when the computer came along, that eased things up. That made it easy. Well, I finally wound up in advertising. And
But Jean mentioned that she worked for you at Moore's Market. You and Jim
No,
both?
Jim did.
Jim did. You
Jim
didn't?
did, and Dennis Fay, his first cousin, did.
Yes.
I didn't. I just spent a lot of time down there hanging out.
Oh, to see Jim or to? Oh, yeah, okay.
well, there was Carolyn and Bill.
Oh, yeah, Bill, Jim's oldest brother, Bill was there, and then Carolyn was there, and then Jim was there, and then and Jim and Dennis Fay were there at the same time. They were, you know.
John, do you recall what you had to pay per hour back then?
I think they just paid them by the week. Just paid by the week.
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
Don't recall. I can recall when I first started out working in 1962, I made 75 cents an hour, and I thought I was doing pretty good. And then after that, after my first summer, and I was going to school, and they moved me up to $1.25, and that would have been 1962. So I was moving on up pretty quick.
But in 62, that probably felt like good money, didn't it?
It did feel like good money.
It probably went a long way.
It did.
Well,
it
when
did.
I went in the Air Force as a private, this before they had the new Air Force ranks, as a private, making $72 a month. And then I made private first, got raised up to 83. And then I think corporal I made 95, and then when I made sergeant, it was like $125 a month. Man, I had to be.
You were in tall cotton, didn't you?
Yeah.
I wasn't paying rent or anything like that.
But also, Gene mentioned about and Mike mentioned to you about your back of your store there. You had a table, and the people would come in. Your dad would cut a piece of meat, but you would furnish the bread, and you would furnish the mayonnaise and the mustard. And we had to pay for the
He wasn't making
drink.
any money at that. It's just his friendly way of doing
We
it.
paid for the meat and the drink, and y'all furnished everything else. And every profession, I believe, came in there to eat one time or another. That was the place to go if you wanted lunch real quick.
It was a social deal, you know. Kids would stop by there, man, on the way home from school. Like I said, there would be several of us in there in that front. There where that glass slanted in, and in that door, and you could see your buddies, you know, walking by out the window, wave them on in there, and have a drink, have a cold drink.
And if you didn't stop there, you went over to Nicholson's Drug and stopped. In the
That was-
50s, before your time, you could walk to Nicholson's Drug over there and
I
hang
went to
out
Nicholson Drugs many times.
and sit back in the back and ate your milkshakes and all
On the
that
counter,
kind
yeah,
of
at the
stuff.
soda fountain. You know, they had an actual soda fountain, and you know, we thought we were big stuff. We'd go in there and order a suicide, and Nick would put a little of everything he had on the fountain in there, and they tasted horrible. I think it was
Now,
just
was that
we
this
thought we
one
had to do
This
it.
one over here or the one down yonder?
No, I'm talking about the one across the tracks over next to where my shop is.
Yeah, yeah.
Over there on the
Yeah,
41.
the kids in high school there, but we would walk from the rock school down, and if Moore's was full, we'd just go on across over there in the afternoon after school. And
I've hit both spots.
Gene, you grew up here, right down by the Depot District. Can you recall what businesses was on this side of the town at that time?
yeah, where Tilly worked, where the service center was a vacant lot. It was just an empty lot. There was nothing there. And then the post office was next to that. And then Patterson had a grocery store next to that. And Miss Berry was where the
Tavern.
There's a
is.
tavern.
yeah, where the beer joint is. And then the cafe was the Classic Cleaners. And the barber shop was 5 and 10 cent store that Miss Blair ran, that everybody in town went to 5 and 10 cent store in the 40s and 50s, because you know, you could go in there and get you a 5 cent one of them big bubblegum cigars about like this for a nickel. And then the next place was the Bright Spot, which finally moved over to the Woodshed, but it was the Bright Spot back in those days.
That was a big hangout for
And
all you
that was-
teenagers after the football
And
games
then
and stuff.
where the post office is now was a house, and it had a sidewalk going up, and then it went out like this. People lived on both sides of that house, and then a kind of a vacant lot. Then well, at that time the Rutherford Courier place wasn't there. It was Marble and Weekly's. And between Marble and Weekly's and that house I told you about, where the post office is one of the biggest fish ponds in Smyrna. There's 5 fish ponds in Smyrna. They're all underground now, but there were 5 big fish ponds. And that one right outside of Maryland Weekly's, between there and where the post office is, where that parking lot is now, it was big enough that I would probably be waist deep in the middle part. And it was probably big around, it's maybe from me to John or bigger, but it had a little bridge that went over the top of it like this. It had 2 sides on it. And we played in that thing in the
Now you've come up with something I don't remember.
Oh yeah, it's there.
Right there. No, I'm not saying it wasn't there.
Yeah, there's another fish pond that's over here, right next door to, there was W.'s house, and then the empty lot, and whoever that was on the corner. Be the corner of Ridley and whatever it is going up to the,
College.
yeah, they've changed the name. See, Division Street was Church Street when we were growing up. But anyway, there was one in that yard, right there on the corner, right there on Ridley Street. Anyway, then from Maryland Weekly's was Moore's Market, and then later Barnett or
Francis
Bywright came in after that. And then the Snake Pit, which is still there, is there, right here. And
It's closed though, isn't it?
I guess a white
It
front,
opens and
white front
closes,
and
yeah.
Snake Pit, and
Yeah.
I thought it looked like it
then
was closed.
here's the city hall, and then in the vacant lot right here was the ice house. And I'd have to pull my wagon from the house down here, and he'd take them big things and put the ice in my red wagon. I'd take it back home. Daddy put it in the refrigerator. And then the theater. And then next door to that was the big 2-story house that ended up being a library, but it was a hotel. Originally it was built as a hotel. And when people came out from Nashville on the train, they would go over and spend the night there in that hotel. Now this is back in the 20s and 30s, long before my time, but I mean, I dadded them there. And they spent the night there. Then they go across town to the livery stable, which was ended up Smyrna Hardware. And they'd rent their horse and buggies, and they'd go to Jefferson for the weekend in old Jefferson, where all the dance hall and all the stuff and bowling alleys and things. Well, then they'd come back and go back to Nashville. And that was that was the end of Miss Nancy's house. Is the next house that was there. Feed mill was always here. Nothing else but this train station here. And then Daddy's funeral home was just around the corner. And Smyrna Church of Christ has always been there. I delivered papers from 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Smyrna wasn't very big, so I only delivered them on that side of town, like Church Street and Coleman Street, all the way up to the water tower, which was College, I think it is now, and then back down. Those are my 90 little people. But
What paper did you deliver? Was that the Banner and Tennessean?
Both. Tennessean before I went to school, Banner when I got home from school. And you had to go knock on the door and try to get money from them, but you know, that was hard to do.
Do you recall how much you got paid for that?
No, I don't. I know that Boy Jr. and Denny, they and my Jim delivered papers out at Seward. Right. Well, they had, but all the papers came into the back of my daddy's funeral home. They put there, and we all rolled them. They throw them out there, and we had to go and roll them, put the Band-Aid, rubber bands on, put them in paper over there behind there, and then they'd take them wherever they were going to go.
But you're talking about those papers. I was in the 7th grade, and I delivered papers with the Mitchells out at the base with Jim and David Young and Jimbo, and got a penny a paper. So I would make 2 cents a day. I would make a penny in the morning and a penny in the afternoon. I'd get 2 cents a day. I'd make about $10 a week.
Hey, Ken, when I was delivering papers up in Murfreesboro, it was 15 cents a week, and it went up to 20 cents, and people fussed about it cost the extra nickel now, but it was 15 cents a week for 6 papers. And what they did, they give us a bill on Friday, and we'd go collect on Saturday morning, and a lot of people wouldn't have 15 cents on Saturday morning. You'd have to wait and wake them up on Sunday morning to get your money. Yeah, they'd spend every bit of it, and Saturday come, they didn't have a bit of money.
You're talking about businesses. Okay, there's between where the post office is now and the ice cream shop. Now there's an ice cream shop there. It was
Now you keep on referring to the post office, but today it's the
Oh, it's a pawn shop.
Pawn shop.
That's
Pawn
right,
shop,
it's a pawn
yeah.
shop. Okay,
Yeah.
you're right, but it was, post
That
office
was our
was,
post-
It was 15 cents a week, and it went up to 20 cents, and people fussed about it cost the extra nickel now, but it was 15 cents a week for 6 papers. And what they did, they give us a bill on Friday. We'd go collect on Saturday morning, and a lot of people wouldn't have 15 cents on Saturday morning. You'd have to wait and wake them up on Sunday morning to get your money. Yeah, they'd spend every bit of it, and Saturday come, they didn't have a bit of money.
you're talking about businesses, okay, there's between where the post office is now and the ice cream shop. Now there's an ice cream shop there. It was about
You keep
flower-
on referring to the post office, but today it's the
Oh, it's a pawn shop.
pawn shop.
That's
Pawn
right,
shop,
it's a pawn
yeah.
shop. Okay,
Yeah.
you're right, but it was, post
That
office
was our
was,
post
well, the
office.
first post office was down on the corner down there where the antique place used to be. Okay, so, but in between that, where the post office and pawn shop, okay, we'll get that right. There in the pawn shop is a sidewalk that runs between there. They got it blocked off where you can't go through there. But the old watchman who walked around town, who was the security guard at night, the old watchman, there's a clock in there that he would go in there and he would set the clock on the time he was and write his time down and move it up as he walked around town at night. And he lived in the upstairs of the garage over there where now is the post office, the telephone office. There was a big 2-story house there that had a garage. He lived upstairs over there. And he was this really nice little old man, and he worked on watches, but you never would see him walking after a certain time in the fall. And you remember, he always had his black coat hanging over his arm on this end if it wasn't cold, and walking with his cane. But he went around town. There was,
What year do you think that was?
oh, this is back in the 40s.
Yeah, that's why I don't remember.
Was he like a town crier or something?
No, he was the security guard, I guess, is what you'd be for
Yeah,
town.
he
He was
was
the
paid
night watchman.
by the city,
He got
yeah.
paid, but that was just one of the clocks. There was one or
bet
two
that
on
was
the
a
other
boring
side of
job back in
town.
the 40s.
You have to
That wasn't anything
remember,
going on.
there was no highway over here. Regal Furniture Store was the bus stop. The bus came from Hilltop, down around by the school, over, went in the front part of where the floor show was, the Regal Furniture, which is now that game shop. It was all open. You got on the bus, and if you were going to Nashville, you still had to go back to here and down. If you were going east, you could get on and it'd go out 231 to Walter Hill and cross out where Coon and them used to live and out that way. But that's where the bus stop was. It came inside that building. There's some pictures somebody may have. It's in Daddy's book, and I've seen it on Facebook. There's a bus sitting downtown, and it's sitting there ready to come out of there and go wherever it's going. There's one little stoplight that's down there.
Can you recall some of the business that was on the other side of the railroad tracks? I guess the first one I remember was down there before Waldron's Barber Shop is.
Waldron's
And I think it might be a tattoo shop there
Yeah,
today.
Waldron's Barber Shop was there. Then there was I don't know who owned that shop that sold appliances. Did Barnett's own that shop?
Mr. Bill Barnett, didn't he?
He made it right there.
Yeah.
And then the next one was the bank, and the posts came out and set out where the street is now. You know, they were all the way out into the street, the front part of that. And then between there's a little alley, and there was another, I don't know what that business was that I was ever in that, but if you go to the back of that alley, there's stairs that go upstairs, and the Sam Davis Lodge's first building was up there, and the girls that were in the Rainbow Girls, which I was in, that's where we met. And then the next was Nicholson's Drug, and then
What was where Wilson's Photography is now?
That was Nicholson.
he's always been there, huh?
Wasn't that Nicholson?
No,
Nicholson
Nicholson
was
was
the
next
next
door. There was
building
a
down.
clothing shop or something there, and then where you are was a grocery store.
Wasn't it children's clothes there?
I believe it was. And then the grocery store, and then across the street was, at that time, Chevrolet Garage was in that place, and then Mr. Ratha Coleman's grocery store, and then the
Livery
where-
Stable,
The
Smyrna
livery
Hardware.
stable.
Smart
Turned
Hardware,
into
but it
Brandon's
burnt part of
Hardware.
that stuff. Where the parking lot is, that part of it burnt, and they just took it down and made the other little strip mall there.
Then it was,
Then Woodshed was, and the Woodshed was built where it is now the dry cleaners. And they moved from this side of town to that side of town. And he would always, that was Walter Loggins owned that place. And he would always let us come in there after we got home from football games on the buses, I think away games on Friday night. I don't know if it was 9 or 10 o'clock. He'd let us come in there till 11. He had a big space in the back where we could play music, and he'd fix us hamburgers and all that kind of stuff.
You referring to the Bright Spot then?
No, I'm talking the Woodshed across
it was the
town.
Woodshed.
Okay.
Wait a minute. No. The Woodshed was Mr. Walls. It was Mr. Jim Walls.
Jim Walls.
But Mr. Loggins had it before then, didn't he?
Yes.
But I forgot what he called it.
Well, I thought the Bright Spot moved from over here on Front Street, which is where its original location was, right over there where G's talking about.
It
My
is.
sister Connie, and you probably no telling who all went over there after the football games, and that was a teenage
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
hangout. Well, I thought it was the second location of the Bright Spot.
Well, it was,
I
but
could be wrong.
they called it the Woodshed. Or maybe they named it the Woodshed when he took it.
Jim, when Major Walls took it over.
Jim.
Sally was the one named it the Woodshed.
Yeah, that was the Woodshed.
Yeah.
But I can
Major
recall
Walls.
just before you get to the Woodshed, between the Bright Spot,
Oh, it was
between
a laundromat.
the laundromat, because every Friday night when Esther and I first got married, we didn't have a wash and dryer.
We didn't either. That's where we'd go down. And there
We
was the
would
dry
go-
cleaners in the back.
dry
all
cleaners
the
in the
base
back,
people,
and you go in
the
there-
uniforms were
Exactly.
ironed in the back.
Yeah. And then after the Bright Spot Woodshed was Larry Lee, Cecil and Larry Lee's.
SO station.
And then
SO
from then
station.
on was the Lane Company.
Well, then sometime in between there where the bank is now, they built a new bank right there where that bank is at. I think Mr. Johnny Brandon and them was in charge of the bank then, and they moved that bank to where it is. I believe it's Pinnacle Bank today.
It is
and then the
Pinnacle
Woodshed.
Bank there.
I mean, then the Lane Cedar Mill.
Hey, Ken?
Yes.
Where that vacant lot is now, that'd be where all the grass is growing up. See, that was where the mill, where the cedar mill was, and you couldn't go any further. That was the end of the road.
That was it.
Yeah, you couldn't go across the railroad track, except there was a little lane that went up to Mr. Hibbett's house. And old man Hibbett lived up there right where the
Boy, I'm hearing a bunch of names I haven't
where
heard in
all
a
of
long
those
time.
the strip mall is up there. But he lived on it, because you go up a little bit, he lived up a little lane, went up a hill to the top of right there is where his house was. There was nothing else up there.
Then, Mike, down on your end of town, after your grandmother and mother and parents sold the property, do you recall what type of business we had down there in that strip mall there?
Well, the main, not really. The main one being, Kmart. That's who they really developed it for. And then there were some small businesses, sandwich shops and.
Big Kroger store. Kroger was down there on
Well,
the
I
end.
forgot about
Yeah, Kroger was.
That was our
huge.
first
That's the
Kroger.
first big grocery store we
Yeah,
had.
it was the first big chain. Yeah, that slipped my mind. But I remember something about it.
Gene wasn't, excuse me,
Yep.
on this side of town, back over to here, where there was the little folks shop. I think Marlou,
She was that's who I was trying to think who went in. She went in when the Bright Spot moved across town.
That was the
Malu
little
made
folks.
that into there. And
What's the name of that?
That's where the
Yeah,
flower
little
shop
folks
is.
shop.
Little
That
Folk
was the
Shop.
name of it?
The Little Folk Shop was the name
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
But there was a flower shop in there, so there's a cooler in the back of that building, and in the building up on the end here, let's see, where the post office was, they turned that into a flower shop after the post office moved to the other. That was I don't know, I was 15 or 16 at the time. There's a big cooler still inside that place.
Is that when Miss Julie Mitchell had it, or was that before that?
No, wasn't even her. They were named, what were those people's names? Julie had already moved. She was down there where the little folk shop was, and then she'd moved to her house
To
by
our
that
house.
time.
Okay. Patsy, you mentioned Miss Marlou Coleman Patterson there just a second ago. She still, you might want to tell us about her. I don't know if you want to tell her age or not, but she'd be one of our oldest residents, and she would kill me if she heard me say that. But tell us about Marlou.
well, when we started talking about this history thing, probably two years ago maybe, John Lanza was still at Channel 3. And of course, being a transplant here, it's not really my history, but I feel like I finished growing up in Smyrna. And so I thought, you know, people are leaving us and we need to get these oral histories. So I thought, well, maybe Marlou will talk to us. Oh, she was excited. And she moved to Adam's place. And she was excited about it at first, but then she said, she called me up. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get on that camera. But if you'll come up here, I'll bring a notepad and paper and I'll dictate. Well, she did. 4 pages, which I...
Patsy, you should have taken a tape recorder.
I
up there.
know it.
Oh,
I
man.
know it. I know. It irritates me that she wouldn't let us have her on camera.
I'll guarantee you, I'd have bet money she wouldn't have been on
She
camera.
wouldn't, but she has a wealth of, you know, and we're losing so many people that had that knowledge, you know. But she was talking about the fact that Lane Company was the first factory in Smyrna. You know, it was over there across the tracks. And you mentioned the chimes at the Methodist Church. They were actually given by the family in memory of her mother, Miss Nell Coleman. And Miss Nell, and some of these notes, she said that her mother and Ms. Evelyn Felder and Ms. Lydia Weekly worked with the WPA, which paid for the Smyrna Gymnasium that was built. What was that over here on?
Down by the rock school?
Yeah.
Yeah, the old gym was out separate, you know.
Yeah, it was separate. So she just had a,
What'd she say they did there?
the WPA. They built they worked with the WPA. What was that called?
Work projects.
What's that?
Work projects administration.
Yeah, and they worked with them to get that gymnasium built. So she has a lot of information. She talked about the banks and bankers that Miss Mamie Miller's father had a bank here. His name was Frank Miller. And First National, so you mentioned First National, I think. Norman Barnett, Mr. Will Coleman, and O.B. Coleman, and Frank Johns Sr. were directors of that bank. So, and she mentioned the telephone company. You remember anything about the telephone company, Jean?
Well, when the telephone company, it was here.
Mr. Frank Miller.
And then if you go right up the street, right up here, the first house behind Moore's Market was where the first original telephone office was, that the switchboards, and you know, where they plug them in.
Yeah, the switchboard was in the front room.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. And when, with Daddy being in the funeral business, if he was coming over to, let's say, Tilly's house, we're going to Tilly's house to eat supper tonight, he just calls her up and say, listen, I'm going over to Tilly's, so if anybody calls me, you plug into Tilly, I'm over there. And that's where he would do when he instead of staying at home. That was there. Then Daddy built the first telephone switch operation, which is now not there anymore, but it was right in front of our house over there. It was a little white building, and he built that one and the one behind it for them to install all of their equipment in there. And because I remember going in there, because I knew some of the people when they finally got it in, and he showed me how the phones went. He said, you call this, he said, you call this number. And so he did, and when it came in, it ran up here and it ran down here and ran down over here like this till it connected to my phone over here. And I thought that was pretty cool. And now it's the big building there, but that's where Basham House, the big 2-story Basham House sat there, and then the garage, and then that was in the vacant lot next to Smith's house, and then they tore all that down when they built the big building.
She also said that some of the local townspeople enjoyed operating it, including herself. I can see Marlou doing that, can't you all? She talked about Ridley and Lawrence grocery store. Does that ring a bell with anybody?
Yes, it was across the street where she's talking about, next to where the Ridley Chevrolet was located and Smyrna Hardware was located.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's right.
Mm-hmm. I think so
Well,
too.
she said they delivered groceries and was located next to the snake pit
Well, that'd be here
in the
then.
building
Well, that would be the building right next door
Yeah.
there.
previously
I-
occupied by Byright, so then maybe it didn't.
Okay.
It may
Okay,
not
so
move.
that was-
that was Francis Byright.
Yeah.
She's going back a few years.
She's
before
going
the
back.
oldest one in here.
Yeah,
So
she.
Marlou, you know, she knows.
And do you remember the bowling alley? She mentioned that there was a bowling alley located in the building above the current town hall, above this town hall. And it was operated by the Hoovers, but I've got to find out who that, she said Mary Emma Graves' brother's mother was from that Hoover family.
Who?
Mary Emma's
Graves.
Mary Graves?
Her
Well, I
mother.
knew it was some kin to them, but I don't ever remember no bowling alley.
Me either.
I don't
We've
even,
been hearing
I
about it.
remember Johnny talking about a bowling alley.
well, most people didn't know we had a theater here in the 50s.
Well, I remember that.
You know.
Well, he ran the projector at the theater.
She
He
keeps
set the things up. The only bowling alley I ever knew from a long time that was around here was one over the old Jefferson that was in the back of the grocery store over there.
The theater.
No, the bowling alley. I didn't know there was a
Over there
bowling
by,
alley here. in
Jefferson
Smyrna,
Springs
ever.
had
Jefferson
one.
Springs. Over at
Yeah.
Jefferson Springs.
Maybe that's what he was. I've heard him mention the bowling alley, but I don't remember where.
You
I
mentioned the
remember
ice
bowling alley
house
at
that
the
you
Springs.
talked about,
The ice house is right here, next door.
and that the post office was fourth class, but it went from fourth to first class when Seward Air Force Base came in. You know, we're just tip of the iceberg here with people that we're talking to, and I'm not sure we're not going to need this group together again because there's just so much here. Rexall drug, she said the berries came from Old Hickory, and that they moved back to Old Hickory, but then they came back to Smyrna. The people that had the Rexall. Now Nicholson had Mr. Nicholson.
Well, Miss Berry always had a drugstore there. Even
Well-
after her husband died, the
Well, she
drugstore
just said
was
they-
always there all during the 40s, 50s, and 60s and stuff. And the jail, our jail sits right here behind this building too. The jail, city
yeah.
jail was right behind
Yeah.
this building,
Yeah.
in the alley.
She talked about the streets being oiled.
Yeah.
What streets you had,
I
you
remember
know?
that gravel. You'd have gravel and then you'd
you
have
put
oil on it.
Hold down a
To
dust.
hold dust down.
Yeah.
She mentioned that the go-kart, the sinkholes, where the Mitchells lived on
Well,
College
they
Street.
were.
She
There were
mentioned that
several
one.
of them down there.
And she said the water, Smyrna water, came from Nice's Dam.
John, you had a picture there of
Yeah.
our first police car.
I got a picture of, this is in the early 60s, the complete police department and all their vehicles.
We had 2 policemen and 1 car. But I thought, before then, I thought Chief Jonah walked
He
before
did.
he had the car.
Yeah, he just walked. And if he arrested somebody, he had to call the sheriff or the highway patrol to take them to Murfreesboro.
Well, the only reason I dispute that, of the year being it, I was still in high school. I graduated in 60, and we had police cars in 58 or 50 and 59. It was Chief Jonah and Sellers.
Yeah, Bell Sellers.
Bill Sellers, that may be the 2 people that are there.
That's them.
Yeah, but they would come around and, you know, they were just in different places, but they were here.
They were really proud. They were really proud when he got that car.
You're right about that, but
I think they were born before 60. Is that
yeah,
what you're
I
saying?
think, I think it was somewhere
before
around 58,
60.
59 somewhere, because I was still in high school when they were that, like he said though, and Penny Marston, who graduated with me, her dad was a policeman, and he always was driving a car by that time.
Gene, you mentioned the fire department, volunteer fire department a few minutes ago. I can recall the volunteer fire department, but then somewhere or another, I thought it was across town over there, but next to Larry Lee's or somewhere. No, it was always here. But anyway, I can recall Johnny Hager was a member. Jim was a member, and Frank Jr. Crosden was a member. Of course, I can remember some other people, but
Well, wasn't the siren on
The
a tripod on the top
I
of this
tell you
building?
what, when it moved from here, it went to the old city hall.
okay.
That's where it went, where the
Okay.
old, where the fire park is still now. And the tower was on top of the city hall. And Tilly probably remembers this too. But when the fire alarm went off, because Roger, her brother, and different ones didn't live close enough to hear that hearing, but they were still in the city. Tilly and myself and any other wife, you had to get up out of the bed when the fire alarm went off, and you had 3 people to call. You didn't have to say anything except fire alarm and hang up. And you're gonna get 3 calls in between fire alarm and hang up. And that's how people that couldn't hear the volunteer fire department alarm, we got it to all of the firemen that were on the roster at that time.
How many people were members of the, roughly?
It was probably, I don't know either.
Mr. Carter, Mr. W. Carter was a fire chief, and I remember Jack Towns was assistant at one time, but he would probably have anywhere from 15 to 25 volunteers.
Yeah, and they made $5 a fire.
Is that what they get paid, $5?
They got paid $5 a fire.
And they drop everything they were doing when that siren went off. I'd be getting a haircut at Walter's Barber Shop, and somebody would be getting a haircut, and that alarm would go off and be a volunteer fireman. He'd rip that cape off and right in the middle of a
listen,
haircut, take off,
you,
Well,
that
they
fire.
did. I mean,
you cleared the way when that fire alarm
Jim
went
could
off.
never hear our kids cry at 2 o'clock in the morning, okay? They just cried, and he just slept through it. But if that fire alarm went off, before the whoop got to here, he was already dressed and almost to the fire department.
That's that famous selective hearing that males have a knack for.
And his dirty clothes that he'd worked in, he always hung them on this one rack in our bedroom every night, so that if he had to go to fire, that's where they were. And the next morning, he'd put them in dirty clothes.
You'd have to get dressed fast.
Also, some things back then that's modern today is telephones. I'm really modern with my telephone, but I can recall our telephones at home at Old Jefferson. It was one of those dial type phones, and it would be probably a minimum of 5 people on our line, up to 8. And it would be hard to get there, especially if a boy and a girl was talking to each other. You couldn't get them off that line unless you just raised Cain and they finally get off. So that was party line, is right. So I guess, and I was probably 8 or 10 years old before we had our first telephone. That I can remember.
Do you
that
remember
we didn't
your
have
number?
Huh?
Do you remember your phone number?
I think it might have been 4 digits. I forgot what it was. Maybe 2185 might have been at Crossing Supply.
What was yours, Tilly, when you first
I
got
don't
a
have
phone?
any idea. I don't remember.
Mine was 94744.
Ours was 30J and 30W. 30J rang in the house, 30W rang in the funeral home.
So you had numbers and letters both.
But ours phone was like what you're talking about, but it was like these microphones here. Well, the first one we had was like Lassie. But then we moved up to these, and you would pick it up right here, and you had to take the receiver off to talk on, but you had to dial the number right down here on the bottom of the phone.
Man, that's before my time, Gene.
Hey, Ken, I remember when a dial phone was a new thing. What you used to, you pick it up and the operator would say, "Number, please."
That's what she was talking about a while ago, pushing in them things.
30J and 30W were those. When you picked up the phone, it triggered them, and you'd have to tell them which number you wanted it to go to. And when the dial system first came to here, we only had to dial 9. We didn't have to dial Glendale. You just dial 9 and the phone number.
Yeah, we thought when they come up with a dial phone that it just couldn't get any better than that.
We were in high cotton then, wasn't we?
Oh, yeah.
I tell you, I've got a dial phone on the counter over at the print shop, and you'd be amazed at the young people that come in there that have never seen one, don't know how to make a call on it. I'm teenagers, and I'll get them to dial their parents' cell phone while they're in there and show them how to dial a number. And real quick story, and I got this from Mary Esther. Somebody in the family used to use their dial phone as kind of like a burglar alarm on the house. They were going to, I don't remember who the people involved were, but when they'd go to visit them at their house, they would dial their number all the way to the last number. They'd run it around, but they wouldn't let it go back, and they'd stick a pencil in the dial with a string attached to the door. And if somebody came in, it would pull the pencil out, it would finish the dial and call wherever they were. I thought that was ingenious. That never occurred.
I know where Maris was talking about.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure about where it was.
If you recall, up Telefarrell's Market, up at Hilltop, Mr. Pete, Esther and I lived in the little block house when we first married there, and so I would help Mr. Pete at night when I get off work, and we'd close up, and so the telephone would be right here, and the door would be right here, and so he would dial his number, 459-218, and then he would put that pencil on the 5 and then put that cord to that doorknob. So if somebody broke in there that released that telephone number, and that called his house. So that was his
That's
burglar
what-
alarm. That was his burglar alarm.
Oh, my
I thought that
goodness.
was smart. I really liked that.
The computers, I don't know when the computers came into to our working force. Do y'all recall those computers before we had them?
Golly,
No.
no, I can't put a date on it. I know we didn't have one at the print shop for a long, long time. John, you remember you did hand-done artwork and paste up and all that stuff way before those Macs hit our business. And then we had a little Tombstone Macintosh. My phone's got about 100 times more memory than that computer had.
Work on the drawing board and put your white board down there and rule it out, whatever size you wanted, and set the type, all your type, and go to dark room, shoot a halftone for your photographs, paste all that down, shoot a negative.
Those days are gone. I've got a display case in front of the print shop over there that's full of my dad's tools and my tools from back when all that artwork and typesetting and everything was hand done. And man, it's all obsolete. Just it's history now.
Well, we used to do illustration when I was working at the co-op. All this like gates and farm implements and all that. We did illustrations on all that stuff.
Oh yeah, pen and ink.
Yeah, line drawing and
You know, my dad did that.
Paste it down, yeah.
I remember.
And now you look at the co-op paper. They don't have any of that. It's all photographs.
Oh yeah, or it'd be clip art or something like that. Wouldn't be anybody drawing it.
Back in the 50s and 60s, what was the population of Smyrna then? 2,500? Was it that many?
Maybe, I was going to tell you though, but with Tilly and I both would probably remember more than anybody. People think Smyrna was always this big. But if you were going out Hazelwood to the old Nashville Highway, after you got up to where we're going to say on the right-hand side of Hazelwood where they play softball and everything there, and everything on the left-hand side of the road from Bel Air out, there was nothing out there. The town stopped right there, and going, this is in the 40s and the 50s and until it started growing in the 60s, but you couldn't go across the creek down there at end of town where the car lot is and where Wendy's was. You couldn't, up to his, you couldn't go across the creek. Stewart Air Force Base's front gate was over in front of my house on, what is that now? What is the road going down there? Where the fire hall, police department and everything. Oh, Jones Mill.
Oh, yeah.
Old Jones Mill Road. There was a bridge down there, and you went down there. The fire department used to go in there and get their gas. The water supply place was in there. But you went across that bridge and on into the base right there. That's the way you entered the base. And when you got on the other side of the base, where the golf club sits right now, is where the two big tanks that hold the fuel for all the airlines, they were there, and people would have to take trucks and go across that bridge and fill those tanks up. And the walkway up here that's nice and flat, when you're walking out there, that's the train track. The train track came off the spur track, and that flat place is the red bed that went all the way in to the base. So Smyrna was not very big at all. Just one much, not as, you know.
Who was our mayor back when you remember those? Sam?
Sam?
Yeah. Who
Sam's
you
the
recall?
only way I remember.
Tilly, you recall who the first mayor was during your day? Was Sam?
No, I don't think he was the first one.
No,
No, the
they
first
had
guy
mayors,
was.
They had mayors
wait a
way
minute,
back
I'll
in the
tell you.
1800s.
Wait a minute.
Was it Ingalls?
You're right. I think Ingram was. Dr.
Yeah,
Ingram.
that sounds.
I think Dr. Ingram was the
I
first
think it's
mayor.
two of them. One was the father of the other one.
Yeah. Now, we was talking about the population while Gene's looking that up. I got it right here. Modern Things by Sister Patsy Brown. The population in 1960 in Smyrna was 3,612. 3,612, and I guess we're close to 50,000 today, I would say.
And in the 60s, you had to be extremely careful talking about anybody in Smyrna because you'd be talking to one of their relatives. You know, I knew all the families. You know, it was. I really loved that part of it. You know.
I don't recall a lock ever being on our house when we was at Old Jefferson.
Oh, we didn't have one down there where we lived before Kmart got there. Had a screen, didn't have air conditioning until I was in high school. Had a window unit. Well, we closed the screen door and put one of those little hooks down on there. I guess that was to keep varmints out or something. I don't know why, what other purpose that would serve.
Dr. Ingalls. Dr. J.W. Ingalls was the first mayor of Smyrna in 1915 when it was incorporated.
1915. Okay. But the first mayor I remember was Sam Ridley, personally. Is that who you recall, anybody before him that you knew personally?
Was who?
Sam Ridley.
Oh, no,
That's probably right.
okay, let's see, it says Dr. Thompson was the 5th mayor of Smyrna. It was Dr. Thompson, Dr. Shipp, Dr. Miller, Dr. Pruitt, Alex Coleman, and then, let's see,
While she's looking at it, do y'all recall our first restaurant or fast food place here in Smyrna? Yes, she.
I say now, it's the first one I really remember was Colonel Sanders in the round building down here.
Yeah, had ice cream looking shop.
It
Yeah.
had a round building, it's car thing now down, but that's the first one I remember.
And it would be in the vicinity, kind of across from where Captain D's is now, somewhere in there. But was that before we had our
Terry's? You know, I'm thinking of really old, like
Yeah.
like the
Oh,
Dairy
oh, yeah.
Dip, the Davis's Dairy Dip
Yeah,
down
Well,
there.
Terry's Drive-In was
And,
before that.
And Terry's Drive-In on Enid Springs Road there, those weren't really chains or anything. They were locally owned. But those are the first ones I remember where you could go get a little hamburger and a milkshake and some fries. And,
Hey, Mike, that was when they finished the highway between here and Murfreesboro. That's when Walter built Terry's Drive-In up there.
there you go. What year do you think?
Somewhere in the 50s.
Yeah, it'd been late 50s, I would say, because it was there when I was in high school in 59. I started in high school in 59. And
Yeah.
that was our.
But I got a
gathering
vague memory
place.
of seeing them pave, you know,
Yeah.
41 parts of it, you know, when it was probably just a 2-lane.
Well, Daddy built that building, and I don't remember what he had it for, but he didn't have it very long. Then Walter Loggins made the drive-in out of it, and they had, you know, you could drive in and they'd bring a little
Oh,
tray
yeah,
out.
it was classic. I loved it.
And
We talking about up in front of where City Hall is today. It's a car lot right there on the corner of Eden Springs and Highway 41, where the
The
Mr.
Castle,
Loggins had it. But
Castle and Dungeon. came
Castle and
in.
Dungeon, that's what I was trying to think of.
You remember that, of course.
I got a later one that came up when I was in high school on the block right down here was called the Chew and Chat. It was a pizza place. They had wooden picnic tables in there and they encouraged you to carve your initials or some kind of something on them. But that was a big teenage hangout. You know, I spent a lot of time
Bud
over
Kilgore
there.
owned that one. Bud Kilgore owned that.
Where was it?
Next door to, it's where Breaking Bread is now. Is that the name of it?
Yeah, right in there.
Yeah, it's that building.
what was it called?
It was called the Chew and Chat. That's later on.
My
Just
daughter,
young people remember that stuff, Gene.
my daughter named that one.
Is that
So
right?
she got $100.
Oh, really? Is that right?
He had a contest for the best.
Well, Tilly, do you remember that, was you already working at well, I'm lost now, Daily News Journal. When the kids would sell prescriptions and the one that sold the most won bicycles,
Yeah,
was you working there then?
no,
Okay, that was another way. The teenagers, the young people, kids, Troy won, my oldest son, who's now 60, won one of the first ones of those. But they'd sell, whoever sold the most when school
Subscription.
got out,
Yeah.
got a new bicycle. And they took their pictures and put them in the paper and all that.
Big deal too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't find it. I
Why
don't know
you
what he
still,
did
you
with it.
think can't find it? Lord have
Well, I
mercy.
don't know what he did with it.
Okay.
He got all the way down to everybody but that.
I'm about, I think we've kindly covered enough for today unless somebody else has something. John, you have anything else you want to bring up?
Oh, I don't know. We may get together again sometime.
Yes, we will.
There's a lot of information John Moore has, I'm
Yes,
sure.
yes. Tilly,
I'm old. I've been around a long time.
Mike,
No, I had a great time just listening to all you guys. I learned some stuff today. I thought I knew a lot, but I learned a lot today.
I appreciate y'all coming today.
Thanks for having us.
It's been fun.
Smyrna.